Thank you, Harun Bhai, and Assalamu alaikum to all the panelists and everybody watching. It's a great pleasure and honor to be here. Thank you for including me. Um, Harun Sharif Saab has clearly identified quite a few things, in particular to museums. So I will just give you, firstly, a very short synopsis of where tourism started and where it's headed, and in particular, due to COVID 19. Um, when we took the government, as you know, one of the most fondest tourists in the country is probably the Prime Minister. He headed the task force himself when he first took over. Due to workload being increasing day by day, he handed over to me, out of which then we created for the first time a national tourism board, which you see in a lot of countries like South Africa and others that tourism is devolved into provinces. The problem in Pakistan that was happening was that because of the devolution and the 18th Amendment, tourism got devolved into the provinces, and that didn't give a holistic outlook towards tourism. It's जो भी अपने सूबे में जो कर सकता था, they were trying to do, but Pakistan wasn't being projected in the way as a wholesome country. So this board is trying to create better coordination, plans, holistic policies, and marketing and branding for Pakistan overall. And after this board, we obviously have PTDC, which in the past has played a vital role in tourism in Pakistan. We took a very different view on PTDC, which I received a lot of criticism for. I'm still receiving. And that was that, PTDC had around 400 employees. Roughly, we took an opinion that we need to give them a golden handshake. PTDC shouldn't be in the business of operating hotels and guest houses. It should just be in the business of marketing, making policies, branding, and so we created basically an endowment fund, which we took money from the provinces to put. They pushed money up to the endowment fund, and we devolved the properties down, or we are in the process of devolving the properties down to each respective province. From there, what we did was that we uh, made the provinces take the burden of giving everybody a golden handshake. And from there, we are now commercializing all around 36 odd properties in each, well, overall, uh, to private sector. So they'll be given like international standards on 33-year leases and run by top operators. Obviously, we've created good KPIs that you have this amount of balance sheet and so on and so forth. What that does is that we've just tendered out to a consultancy that will give us plans of each and every property, that if it's an 8 bedroom, can we take it up to a 15 bedroom? Then whoever we lease it to, they should have the finances that within the first year they should start the development of the remaining bedrooms and so on. So that will overall give you maybe close to 25 new 3 to 4 star hotels across Pakistan in the next 24 months. Um, just talking briefly on the museums, I think that's what the main thing is that I should concentrate on: the museums and COVID. Harun Bhai, if I'm not mistaken, yes.
That's correct.
So with museums, thanks to the help of Harun Sharif Saab, we are primarily looking at Lahore Museum and Taxila Museum. Lahore Museum is still quite ahead of the Taxila Museum in the sense that it has an autonomous board at least, and which is supposed to govern. But unfortunately, what happens in Pakistan is that in museums, we place the people who are basically under punishment. So if you've been a bad boy, you get posted to a museum. Uh, and this is the kind of culture which we're trying to change, because if you go to the National History Museum, you go to other places, they're huge money makers for the government. And ours, unfortunately, every year the government has to put money year on end into these, in particular, both these entities, which in our opinion is a money maker. So what we have done is that we've passed a summary. Well, we moved a summary which will be passed. It's been agreed by it's been passed by cabinet, where we're moving first of all Lahore Museum under archaeology rather than sitting under culture. because culture in the province of Punjab sits under information, and information minister probably has lots of other things to do and not concentrate on museums per se. So we thought as a starting point, we will move the Lahore Museum under archaeology, which then comes under tourism. And we will then revamp the board, make the board more private sector heavy, less bureaucratic. And then from there, we've come up with a whole holistic plan of what we're going to do with the market next to it, bring that into a shape or form of another museum, and make that whole area, which I discussed with the chief secretary recently, into a complete pedestrian area. So you can walk from one building to the other, and we should make it a very nice sort of tourist attraction with two beautiful museums, one Lahore Museum, and the other Taunton Market. We're looking at, inshallah, creating an Islamic heritage museum over there and bringing in international investors or countries to sort of take over. But that will only be done to bring it up to the international spec once the board is right, and once we actually have the policies of hiring and firing. No longer should it be a place where bureaucrats are placed for being out of flavor. It should be where the best talent can be hired. Like we're doing in PTDC, we had 400 employees. We gave them a handshake. We're down to 60, 79. And we've marketed, we're advertising every single spot, from social media experts to the MD, all the way through. We want the private sector in it. So this museum has to be run the same way. So we've got a very good plan coming forward. We've passed it through the NCC, which the PM chairs, and we're going to try to push it through this. Um, what we do find is reluctancy of the private sector sometimes getting involved with the government sector, because they just feel they have to take decisions of expenditures, of hiring, firing, and so on. And perhaps they always feel that maybe after this government or something, then they might be put into a punishment spot. But you know when this becomes an institution, which every museum should be its own institution, these things should flow very easily. It's just the beginning bit which is difficult. Even more difficult than this is Taxila Museum. And Taxila Museum, I'm sure many of you have visited. It's a beautiful museum with great relics, Buddha relics as well, and one of the tooth, which you only have another one in Sri Lanka. And then you have a beautiful stupa just behind it, which should be all integrated into, and just in front of it, you have some of the caves and the plateau of Alexander the Great as well, if you visit closely. So they should all be incorporated into the museum, or at least into their tour. But with Taxila Museum, unfortunately, that was really a Guantanamo Bay of museums, where really you just had you know the ones that were really out of flavor over there. Lahore Pirbi was somewhat better, but this one was like that. So this one doesn't even have an autonomous board, so it's completely run bureaucratically. Thanks to the help of Mr. Harun Sharif and his team as well, we've now passed that, and it's been passed now through cabinet, that we are creating, through Punjab cabinet, that we are creating an autonomous board for it, just like Lahore Museum. And we will link it. And I think at the very beginning, we're probably, because of, again, not so many people coming forward, we're just thinking that the same board can kind of look at both museums together holistically to fast track this process of what we want it to be. Once we get these things streamlined, then again, we will invite the private investors to come, investors and the operators. We've had people in we've got consultancy from the Louvre, we've got Qatar interested, Saudi interested. So we've got some really big opportunities with both these museums. Along with that, we uh, we we are completely revamping Peshawar Museum. We're completely revamping Kalash Museum. We're doing an upgradation of Hund Museum, Ektabad Museum, DA Khan Museum. These ones are coming for upgradation. But a complete revamp from the KP government is happening of Kalash and Peshawar Museum. So if we can, inshallah, in the next 18 months, really have four museums, which would ideally I would like to have an international standard, that will actually generate money and pay for the salaries, and become an independent body with funds. And you've seen in the past in other places, museums are just not used for museums anymore. They're used for many other things as well, but only when they're beautiful enough to use. And lastly, most importantly with museums, when I was discussing with KP yesterday, was that with museums there has to be, and as you're seeing museums across the world, they're becoming modernized. And the reason, not only the main reason they're also becoming modernized, is that so your future generations keep an interest in them as well. It's all well and good, the history, the archaeology that you have in there, but they have to be interactive with the youth. And I think that's very important to keep them engaged for the future years. So this is where it is with when it comes to museums. Would you like me to talk about some of the relief or pandemic, how we've gone about
I
it,
think
or?
it will be useful if there are, the headline steps which your government took to deal with the impact of pandemic.
Sure, sir. So what we have done is that in the pandemic, obviously, like every other country, we were hit badly. I am pleased to say that it was for a much shorter period of time compared to what we're seeing in a lot more countries. However, and I am pleased to say that some of the SOPs, which I wish we would have shared earlier with you, that we created for when we opened up hospitality, was some of the best SOPs people have seen, and a lot of other countries have adopted them, and even the WHO and the WTO also admired the SOPs we created this time for opening up during the pandemic. Along with that, with mixed with State Bank, we did a few things. We gave working short-term, long-term working loans to entrepreneurs in the hospitality sector, so that they can get past the pandemic at least. We created a special window for financing for again for people for those in the hospitality sector, along with National Bank of Pakistan. We created this where they'll give collateral and they'll get preferred rates on loans. We had a reduction. We had a reduction on the interest rates, varying between 15 to 16%. We also instructed State Bank to restructure their loans and their debt servicing during the pandemic, because they weren't earning an income and they had debt on their head. So they had preferable debt servicing opportunities. Also, what we did is that we created we made the TNT sector. We registered companies to be allowed to maintain foreign currency exchange accounts. This created a much easier, transparent flow of foreign currency coming in and out of the country, and it also protected them from the exchange rate, the sort of disruptive exchange rate we had during the time. What we also did in the federal and ICT, GB, and AJK and KP, Punjab is still in process because it's just a bit bigger. And Sindh, we've requested again. Well, Sindh actually hasn't progressed in it at all, but we've requested them again. Is to give exemption of DTS fees for all the operators for a year, so that during the pandemic they don't get too hit and in it. So we've done that. We're nearly there with packages with the Commerce Ministry, whereby we're giving hopefully zero taxation on heavy duty equipment for the construction of hotels. So, i.e., your industrial kitchens that you require, your special sort of air conditioning units, heavy adventure wear for adventurous activities and stuff for the hotels. So we're providing these sort of reliefs so that in the time period when people are developing, it encourages them. In the construction package, in the Prime Minister's construction package, they get a relief. And then when they order these equipments, they should get a relief. So in that lull period of not having that much tourism, at least they will start developing and expanding for when it opens. When it did open, I will say that, as a lot of you will know, it was difficult to go anywhere because it really opened with a bang and it was overflowing. It still is. And so now we're really focusing a lot on pushing winter tourism across the country, so that tourism just does not remain seasonal to the summer. And we should really, really be focusing on winter tourism, which we're trying to push, especially where we have snow at the moment. So that's a overall synopsis. If there's any in particular questions, of course, I'm here to answer. I hope it helps. Thank you. Well, funny enough, Chitral is actually one of my focus points um, that I'm doing. We have just, I just did the groundbreaking of a $30 million development in Chitral. Bijan is the hotel name. It's about a 4 to 5 star hotel. It'll be ready in about 18 to 24 months. Work is on site. It's I've never seen in Pakistan work being done in that sort of speed where they just have everyone on site camping out there and developing it. It's right. It's got an infinity pool right on the cliff where two of the rivers of different colors meet. I mean, it's stunning. But regardless of that, Chitral is something that I'm personally concentrating a lot on, and we're trying to bring a lot of it into the end of the CPAC as well, which we spoke to General Salim Bajwa yesterday. Day before yesterday, we had a meeting with him. We've got around 8 roads development in Chitral infrastructure. It's coming into one of the ITZ zones, the integrated tourism zones that we are creating. So Chitral is actually the least of the isolated areas that we have to worry about. Chitral is genuinely something which we are is one of our key areas to go to. So Chitral is a natural hub of tourism, I believe. Just everybody's body language, their ethos is very much based around tourism. So it's a very easy sell, Chitral.